Hello there, and today's videos have some gameplay of me private matching my friends in Modern Warfare 3. If you want to see the raw footage of this and hear us scream at each other and yell obscenities, then let me know and I will try to make some compilations out of these matches. Thank you, and see ya. Alright, so if you've been following Modern Warfare news, you might have heard a rumor, kind of an unconfirmed thing, that Modern Warfare's multiplayer might not give you a minimap by default and instead only give it to you when you earn a UAV. Now, I personally have a lot of fears when it comes to Modern Warfare's multiplayer. What will the created class be like? How are they going to deal with weapon balance? How many weapons are we going to have? How are the maps going to be laid out? How are they going to play? All of that is a giant concern of mine. I feel like more people are concerned about post-launch content in comparison to just core multiplayer gameplay mechanics, but I am definitely far more concerned with how multiplayer is just going to be in general. So this rumor that there's not going to be a minimap by default would seem like an okay thing if you're a hardcore player or you play games that don't have working minimaps anyway, but there's a reason that minimaps have been in COD in the way they have been since Call of Duty 4. Certain minimaps have gotten smaller or wider, more or less detailed. They've also become round for some reason, and they've also had the whole fog of war nonsense that Black Ops 4 brought into the game. Alright, so let me tell you why I'm not digging this idea at all. And I'm going to have to tackle this from multiple fronts. First things first, Call of Duty has always had the give and take of suppressor. If you use a suppressor, you have less range, which means you deal less damage over range, but you don't show up on the minimap when you fire, and your gun makes less sound. If you want the maximum damage your gun can put out, you do not equip a suppressor, but then everybody can see you on the minimap when you fire. And you see, this type of balance works really well in Call of Duty. One of the big reasons is the map design. You have very fast, tight-knit action in some Call of Duty games, and some larger, more complicated maps in other Call of Duty games that facilitate more camping and conservative playstyles. You see, if you're camping on a complicated map and you don't want to be found, you need to use a suppressor, and the nice trade-off is that you do not deal your max damage. But you get to conceal your location, and you get to sit in corners, you get to hold down long lines of sight, you get to hold down a lane, you get to hold down a building, you get to do what you want if you don't want to play at the breakneck pace of everyone else. That's why larger maps, in my opinion, are great, is because you get to kind of choose your playstyle a bit more freely, because the games aren't limiting you with limited map design. But there is hardcore mode, and hardcore mode doesn't give you a minimap unless you call in a UAV. This is very, very true. But the thing is, in hardcore mode, you die in one shot to a pistol across the map. It's just easier to get kills in hardcore mode, so when you see somebody that's sitting in a corner, you only need to land one shot on them. If they kill you, you don't need to get your grenade quite as close to kill them. You don't need to land as many shots through a surface to kill them. You don't need to, you get what I'm saying. When enemies die in one shot to fundamentally every weapon in the game, no minimap, no HUD makes a good bit of sense. And for the people that like that style of minimalist gameplay, one shot, one kill, that's great for you. Because hardcore really isn't about meta, it's about aim and shoot. I always laugh when someone says, oh, this gun's really good in hardcore. Yeah, any gun that puts out a bullet when you pull the trigger is good in hardcore. Obviously, high rate of fire guns are really good in hardcore, but honestly, so is a pistol. As long as you can land one shot or two shots at most, you're good. But for the rest of the community that enjoys having a meta with give and take and careful class customization, the minimap's been a big part of that. The minimap is your friend and your enemy at all times, and if you want to stay off of it, you need to build your class around it. If you want to see the people that are hiding from you, you have to use items to do so. This could be a motion sensor, a UAV, a SATCOM, whatever you want to call it, a heartbeat sensor, an MMS scanner. You have to build your class to find people, or build your class to hide from people, find a balance in between. Maybe you want to hide from UAVs, but you don't mind your shots showing up on the minimap, or maybe you want to run a suppressor and then a rocket launcher to shoot down UAVs so you're not on the minimap. You know, there's lots of things that come from the minimap being there that is integral to the game. And what also concerns me is that if they're really thinking about doing this, this might be because the maps in this new Modern Warfare game are so simplistic that they're not worried about anybody hiding in dark corners or tall buildings or holding down a power position and kind of being hard to find. Now, the chaos of Battlefield 5 I do not think works without a functioning minimap where, you shoot and you appear on it. I don't think it works without it. I think that's one of the biggest problems with Battlefield 5 is that when you're playing solo, you just kind of feel overwhelmed. At least I do. There's just so much going on, and you can't pinpoint it unless, people start spotting and doing their job, which just isn't something you can rely on, making you feel codependent. You're not going to be fighting 32 people in Call of Duty. It's not going to be as chaotic and messy as a Battlefield game, but Call of Duty still is a very fast-paced game, and I can see lots of people abusing the lack of minimap. Unless they want to put your UAV on a recharge where, it just charges up like a specialist ability and you're pretty much guaranteed it, and all you can do is speed up how fast you get it by getting kills and score, but I think that's incredibly unnecessary. I remember a long time ago somebody bounced around the idea of your minimap being a little holographic menu thing on your arm, like a sleeve on your arm that has like a screen and it shows your character where things are, and you'd have to hold like left on the D-pad to hold your arm up and see the minimap. I thought that idea was cool at the time, but it's also kind of unnecessary. Call of Duty is a fast-paced game, and the minimap has served, like I said earlier, as your enemy and your best friend simultaneously, and the minimap is kind of this silent dictator, and it dictates the way you build your class depending on how you want the minimap to serve you, or how you want the minimap to not serve your enemies. I am all for change and innovation when it comes to Call of Duty, but I think this is unnecessary, and unless this game is going to play drastically different than every other COD game, I can't see this being a good thing. A player should be punished in Call of Duty for having bad trigger discipline and firing their gun off when they don't want to be seen. That shouldn't only be a negative against them if there's a UAV up. Now, they could have shot indicators on your screen, letting you know where you're being shot at from or where enemy fire is. Similar to how Rainbow Six Siege does it. When an enemy fires near you, you get a little indicator that lets you know where you're being shot at from, and suppressors would remove that indicator. If they do that system, that's not terrible in a game where you're mostly going to be doing 6v6 matches or 5v5 matches, we don't exactly know yet. And maybe it could be a good thing because it would slow down the game a little bit if you didn't just see, oh, there's somebody on the radar up there specifically on the second story of this building, I'm going to run up there and kill them. And maybe it would slow it down a little bit because when you hear a noise, you have to kind of guess where it is, you have to kind of listen to the sound, you're going to want a good headset, but either way you're going to want to listen for enemies and then move in more carefully because you don't have exact pinpoint locations as to where people are when they're firing, you have general information. And I'm all for slowing down Call of Duty just a little bit, because when Call of Duty is too fast, it just becomes a clusterfuck, especially if they're going to do small, simple maps. And then I have a continuation of a problem I've had over the last couple of years, where COD produces very simplistic maps that force the same range of engagements, and long play sessions become fatiguing and boring to me because my brain isn't being stimulated with multiple types of gameplay variety and engagement variety. The thing is that if Call of Duty does this, they're basically saying you need to be paying attention and you need to be using a good sound system, good headset, and that will honestly alienate a lot of casual players that just play from their TV speakers, which makes up a larger portion of the COD community than you might think. This is why having hardcore as a separate game mode is a good idea. That way your average person that just wants to hop on and play TDM and doesn't want to deal with getting one-shotted by a handgun across the map doesn't require a good headset and 100% concentration. Players like this will experience lots of times where they get shot from areas they aren't aware of, because your teammates might be getting flanked and getting killed as an enemy makes his way behind you, and the enemy doesn't even need to run a suppressor, and then you end up getting taken out from behind from someone that didn't even need to cater their class to that playstyle. So there's my points. The minimap is your best friend and your worst enemy. It always has been. There's give and take there, and if you aren't in the mood for that give and take and you want something that's more simple, a little bit more raw, then just play hardcore mode. If you want to stay off the radar, you build your class around it. That's how it's always been, and it's one of my favorite things about Call of Duty is you have to spec into the playstyles you want to do. And like I said earlier, I'm concerned about them making small simplistic maps to work with this, because you really can't have big, complicated maps and no permanent mini-map, because then you're just asking for camper's paradise. And I've been very clear on this channel when saying I don't mind campers in Call of Duty, because they have to either build their playstyle around it, or I get to see where they are on the minimap, and after they kill me once, I have a multitude of tools to eliminate them with. But something that can be, again, a camper's best friend or their worst enemy is the minimap. That's not there, and suddenly a camper doesn't really need to worry until the UAV comes in, and if there's a perk that counters UAVs, then they'll probably be running that. This will cater to flanking and lurking and camping in the same way it has with Battlefield 5. Even on a larger, more chaotic scale like with Battlefield 5, you see how the game caters to a flanking, lurking playstyle, which often just results in you getting shot in the back from someone that didn't even need to practice trigger discipline in the chaos of combat, and you didn't see him closing in around behind you. Keeping your head on a swivel at all times is kind of frustrating for solo players and casual players. And that's another thing too I didn't even think about, is that if there's no minimap, it's going to encourage people to camp because they're not going to feel confident to move out into combat. They're not going to want to run out into the middle of the map and take you out. They're not going to know exactly where you are. They're going to wait for you. People are going to sit in corners and wait for you to walk by because they don't want to hunt you. They don't have the tools to hunt you. So they might just camp for 3 or 4 kills to get a UAV, and then they might play aggressively, and then when that UAV goes away, they go back to sitting and waiting for their next UAV. So however you slice it, it's not a good idea. And there's a separate mode that eliminates the minimap and heads-up display that you can play if you're into that style of gameplay. But before you argue with me, please think about how integral the minimap has been to the balance of Call of Duty for a very long time. Again, worst enemy or best friend, depending on how you play and what you put on your classes. You get rid of that aspect of the game, and you have a whole new set of problems that you probably don't want to have to deal with and complain to Infinity Ward on Twitter about. Anyway, that's the end of my rant, my tangent, my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and I will see you when I see you. Goodbye. Oh, I see him. He's Bamusin. Alright. Jingles, that's really rude. Now I have to spawn here and do that. Dylan! Let's talk. Let's talk about...
No. I'm out of ammo. Let's not do it.
I just want to talk. Jingles, you know what has to happen. That is just unfortunate.